John, we're going to be joined by somebody we both like dealing with in New York Met clubhouse, and by the way, in the Arizona Diamondback clubhouse, Tommy Pham.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what Tommy has to say. He is one of the most honest guys going, and I guess 30 years ago, nobody would make that distinction of who the honest guys going are, but now everybody edits everything down, and you know, everybody's trying to be diplomatic, and you know that if you say something, it might end up on Twitter, and everybody's very careful. But Tommy Pham, not careful. Can't wait to hear
No,
it.
no, you hear what's on his mind, which is good if you do what we do, and I'm sure he'll be good on the show. He joins us. We'll talk about the new Hall of Fame ballot that's out. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, there's a week I think something should be bigger news than it generally is, which is the revealing of the Hall of Fame ballot. Obviously, a lot is made when people enter the Hall of Fame justifiably, right? It is the Hall of Fame. But simply to get on the ballot, I've been part of the screening committee, I think, for the last 3 years that kind of decides you got to play 10 years. You got to have a level of distinction. You got to have a group of us on that committee. I think it's got to be at least two people think you should get on the ballot. It means you're probably a top 10% of players of all time. And that the ballot came out this week. It had all the returning guys. I think there were 14 returning guys headlined by Todd Helton, who got 72.2% of the vote. But John, a lot of interesting new candidates. Adrian Beltre, who I assume is going to waltz in, and then some tough calls on guys like Joe Mauer and Chase Utley, etc. Take it wherever you want to
Well,
go on the
Beltre is a
ballot.
slam dunk. I mean, 93 WAR, 477 home runs. I mean, he's clearly a Hall of Famer. I guess we'll be criticized when he isn't unanimous, but that doesn't matter. He's going to get in, I'm sure, on a first ballot. I favor Mauer. I have a little extra sympathy for the catchers. Tough position. His catching career was cut short when he got a concussion. Did win 3 batting titles as a catcher. It is the Hall of Fame. I think, in his day, he was the best, or among the couple best. So to me, those two should get in, I think. We'll see. Mauer's the first ballot. I'm not sure. I think Utley's close. Certainly worth considering. He's fewer than 2,000 hits. That may be held against him. And there are a lot of other really good players on that ballot that I'm going to take a close look at. And I'm going to again look. I haven't voted for Helton or Wagner yet, and I think they're trending up. Where do you stand there? I mean, I personally, and I don't think the whole of very good is a fair thing to say. These are all great players. I don't like to besmirch anybody and say, oh, he's all very good. That sounds like a put down. Billy Wagner is a great closer. Tom Helton was a great hitter. To me, they're just not over the line for Hall of Fame. I don't know. To me, they're going to get
Yeah, I
in,
haven't
and we're
voted
going
for
to have a
them.
couple more guys get in who I probably not going to vote for. I don't know. Where do you
Yeah, I always try to remember that you vote for people, you don't vote against them. I guess
right?
that's semantics. You're deciding who's probably in the top 1% of players of all time. And guys to me like Todd Helton and Billy Wagner fall in like the 2 to 3%. They're just below the line. And I know people take that as an insult. I guess I'm saying they're better than 97 or 98% of the players who've ever played Major League Baseball. Just to go back, just because you mentioned Mauer, his career arc and his ending numbers are very similar to Don Mattingly. There's
Yeah.
about 5 dominant years where you could make an argument, is he the best hitter in the sport? I think they both won MVPs. Mattingly won a batting title. I think you mentioned Mauer won 3. And then due to injury, the back end of the career, that last 5 to 8 years, was very similar, contact oriented, but they lost power. Mauer had to shift out from catcher. And their end numbers, if you go look at the final numbers, they're very close to each
Yeah.
other in totals. And Mattingly's obviously a guy who didn't get in. I think you said the key thing. Does the fact that Mauer's front end was at a position like catcher turn this different for him and get him in? Though I would argue Mattingly's one of the 3, 4, 5 best defensive first basemen in the history of the game. It's an interesting one. And John, just because the Utley one, I'm going to be vexed by Utley because you mentioned the accumulation is not going to be strong, but I'm such a big guy for winning And he feels like when you talk about Billy Wagner, and I hate to do this, like Billy Wagner had very bad numbers in the few postseasons he appeared in, and he was a major reason why his teams got eliminated in a couple of those years. And I think like if you're going to be the field goal kicker of our sport, you got to make those field goals. And he didn't make them. Whereas I think Chase Utley, that great Phillies team, Jimmy Rollins got 12.9% of the vote last year. Like, do both belong in? Do neither belong in? I don't know. Where are you on that?
Yeah, I can't separate them very much either. I have ended up voting for Rollins, not because he was on our podcast, but to me, I think he was dynamic, and I eventually voted for him. I didn't vote for him his first year, and it may be the same with Utley. To me, he's a winner. Was a great defensive second baseman. Was great in the postseason. I'm all about impact. Back to Mauer and Mattingly. Yes, they are similar. I voted for Mattingly. I'm more about peak and impact than career numbers, and fame. I'm about fame. Mauer was a great in my mind. Utley right on the border. I'm betting it's going to be like Rollins and like Roland for me, where I didn't vote for him initially, and then I ended up voting for him. I am switching on Beltran. I am going to vote for Beltran. I do think he is a Hall of Famer. As you know, I withheld the vote last year due to the Houston situation, and I said I would vote for him in subsequent years. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I always vote for Andrew Jones too, so I'm going to have at least 5 guys in there. But I'm with you on Wagner. He's obviously great. I'm not diminishing him. I'm sure he's not going to be happy with either of us, but I'm not diminishing him in any way. I think he was great. He certainly struck out a ton of guys. He limited to a very low batting average, had a great ERA. I think his whip is right there with Mariano. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. If you're the closer, even if it's only 10 or 12 innings or something, they better be pretty good innings. And he really did not come up big in those games. I mean, maybe it's just bad luck or whatever, but
in those 10,
to overcome that, to me, you'd have to have enormous bulk numbers. Maybe if he had 500, 600 saves or something like that, I would say so. I think he's getting in. I'm not going to argue strongly against it. I get it. He was great, certainly. And I'm with you. I think he's in the top 2% for sure. But I just have trouble with that. With Helton, too, didn't have the big, if you're going to be in Coors Field, I'm not counting it against you necessarily, but if you're going to be in Coors Field, you're going to have big bulk numbers too. And he didn't have 400 home runs. Now, he was a great hitter. I'm not saying he's not, certainly worthy of strong consideration, and he's going to get in, but I can't get there.
I think one of the reasons that Billy Wagner was limited to 10 or 12 innings was because of Billy Wagner, right? Like they got eliminated a few times. Like we were both in a ballpark in Game 7 at the NLCS in 2006, and the manager of the team, Willie Randolph, seemed to have lost faith in Wagner. Aaron Heilman's in that game at the end to give up the key home run. And again, this ends up being where you're saying something bad about somebody who you think is great. And
great.
I hate that practice at that time of year, but you're kind of trying to separate the 1% from the 2%, or the 2% from the 3% and 4%. And, it's a difficult game. And I don't think the Hall of Fame is diminished if Billy Wagner is in it. It's not diminished if Todd Helton's in it. It's a bit of a democracy. It's hard to get to 75%. I think you're right. I think both of those guys will ultimately get to 75%. I did vote for Beltran last year. You mentioned Andrew Jones actually finished above Beltran last year, got 55% of the vote. Beltran got 46.5. I think that whole group of center fielders was hurt by playing at the same time as Griffey. Like Griffey was so obviously great, obvious Hall of Famer that Beltran and Andrew Jones and Jim Edmonds and Bernie Williams and Torrey Hunter and Steve Finley and Mike Cameron and Johnny Damon, like there's a group of center fielders who are exceptional historic players. I wonder, without Griffey, do guys like Lofton, I didn't even mention, do Lofton and Bernie, do they get a lot more attention? Does Jim Edmonds get in? Do Andrew Jones and Beltran get in easier? I'm not sure, but it was an historic period for above average center fielders.
Right. Well, they were great. I mean, Bernie Williams is a great player. Kenny Lofton, they're all great players. I did not vote for any of those players. Andrew Jones, to me, 400 home runs, 10 Gold Gloves. I mean, there's basically what 4 guys who've done that, right? Schmidt, Mays, Griffey, as who you mentioned, Jones. I don't think anybody thinks of Griffey, or even, you know, in their back of their mind, they're thinking, well, I've seen a better center fielder than this guy. I don't think that's it. They just, the bulk of the voters, for whatever reason, thought that Bernie Williams and Kenny Lofton and Jim Edmonds and the others that you mentioned were just short. And I personally would not folks off the ballot who are just short. I'd keep the ballot, keep them on the ballot, because guys have gone from very little to 75% in the past. I think Wagner's one guy who's going to do that. I do think there's too much groupthink. You know, there's too much on the internet that's influencing people. That's probably led to people going from 10% to 75%, which is, I think, why the MVP candidates now. I mean, I would have voted for Acuna and Ohtani ultimately anyway, but do you really think they were 30 for 30? You think if there was no Twitter and nobody was saying anything about who they're voting for and why this guy is great or whatever, you think nobody would have voted for Corey Seager? I mean, he helped his team, I mean, eventually win the World Series, but get in the playoffs, incredible, very good defensive and incredible offensive shortstop for a winning team. We used to not vote for guys who were not on winning teams very often, and now it's like thrown by the side. I think we got a bit of groupthink going on here. I mean, Acuna I would have voted for ultimately, but there was a case for Betts, right? He didn't have a higher WAR than Acuna. Nobody, zero. He got 0 votes. I think there's too much groupthink going on.
I think it's a worse thing, John. I think it's group fear. I think people are afraid to be beat up on the internet by the worst of the trolls, instead of either ignoring it, shutting it off, whatever, you know, vote what you think. And I think that we're probably going to be more archaic voters as this goes along with the Hall of Fame, because I think people are going to look at the metrics and have groupthink. And I'm a big guy, again, for winning. Beltran is an easy vote for me, because I think in that group of center fielders I just mentioned, I think he's the second best after Griffey in the era.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's no question
and then he nudges over the line because he was such a great postseason player. You know, Utley's ability to help a team win. The fact that Mauer's team, you know, Mauer didn't perform well in the postseason and his teams never really advanced. I mean, again, we're looking at these thin margins between the 1% and 2%. Again, you hold it against Helton, that terrible, you know, he was on a tough place to win in Colorado. I don't know, but like the goal of the game isn't to accumulate WAR or to have like great statistics. The goal of the game is to win, and players who help you win, like Jimmy Rollins, like Johnny Damon, I think they have much greater value than we end up kind of giving them at this time for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mauer's enough over the line. Not going to look at his postseason numbers. He did get that hit, the worst call we've ever seen. You remember the Phil Cuzzi call in left
Phil
field,
Cuzzi, right?
Where the ball lands in fair territory about 10 feet, and it was called a foul ball. You know, in those days we couldn't do anything about that, and he ended up not getting that double. Yeah, I mean, I do think the postseason plays big for me. I'm about impact. So, I mean, I voted for David Cone. I was one of the, I wouldn't say few, but there weren't a ton of people who voted for David Cone. I always supported Schilling, except for that one year where he got on the writers quite a bit. But 9 out of 10 years, I supported Schilling. And, you know, I think impact is important. And that's, you know, again, why I didn't ultimately, or I haven't voted for Billy Wagner. And I haven't sent in this year's ballot. You know, who knows? Maybe I could change my mind. Maybe I'll add someone. I mean, there are a lot of guys on this ballot I want to at least look at. I mean, David Wright had a great start to his career. Obviously, he got hurt. He's probably a little bit short. Matt Holliday, who we've had on as well as Jimmy Rollins, he had a great career. I mean, I don't want to hear Hall of very good for any of these guys. He was great, but is he a Hall of Famer? You know, might be a little short.
David Wright, kind of
great career too. I mean, there were a lot of guys on this ballot. We don't have those 10-year relievers like we used to get on this ballot. The committee's doing a better job of winnowing them out. But so everybody was worth considering.
David Wright had a career somewhat again like Mauer and Mattingly, right? Like that front 5 to 6 was Hall of Fame level. You know, he was on a track for like a Beltray-like career.
Right,
Scott
but Mauer was the best catcher, and Mattingly was the best player. You know, arguably, I wouldn't I'd have to go back and look, but I didn't feel that about. I mean, I thought he was obviously great and an all-star and all that, but I didn't feel he was in that category during his prime.
But we didn't think that. My comp was like he was on like probably a Beltray Roland trajectory. Guys who got in, who might not have been looked at as the greatest of all time, but they were well above average guys at the best position. John, just to put a finer point on it, why don't I just say the 12 guys who are the new guys on the ballot? I'm sure anybody listening to a baseball podcast probably knows it, but just in case, we mentioned Beltray, Mauer, Wright, Bartolo Colon, you mentioned Matt Holliday, Adrian Gonzalez, Jose Reyes, Jose Batista, who had a fantastic, I mean, again, to your point, everyone had a fantastic career. Victor Martinez, James Shields, and Brandon Phillips. And the leading vote getters who are returning, Todd Helton, Wagner, Andrew Jones were all over 50%, Beltran at 46.5, and then steroid guys, A-Rod 35.7 and Manny 32.2. And our guy Jimmy Rollins all the way down to 12.9.
Yeah. Hey,
John,
by the way, do you vote for A-Rod?
I don't.
You don't vote for A-Rod, but
do you vote for A-Rod?
No, I don't vote for any steroid guys. But you voted for Bonds and Clemens, right? What's the distinction there?
Probably too long to go into, but if I were just doing a separating situation, I think it became offensive when you get bagged the second time. You could play a little bit loose.
Your bar's pretty low, but it's a
loosey goosey era. But then when it comes back again that you didn't stop, it's going to be like the Robinson Cano thing. You didn't stop, and therefore you're not going to get the vote.
Right. So your bar's pretty low, but he still didn't clear it. So
he didn't clear. And look, I mean, maybe
Sheffield. How about Sheffield? I mean, just on the numbers.
This is his 10th year on the ballot. He's like Jeff Kent last year. This is his last chance to get in.
I don't get the support there. He's moving up on the ballot. And we're not. He was great, but that one I don't get because he was steroid guy and he's borderline. Now, if he had no steroids at all, there's no steroid attachment to him, and he had those numbers, I think he's probably over the border and a Hall of Famer. But he's clearly a steroid guy to me. I don't know what's the issue. Why? To me, that's the strangest thing about it. That Sammy Sosa get almost no support. Clearly a steroid guy. Ortiz, clearly a steroid guy, got 80%. And Sheffield may get in. I mean, I don't get all the different distinctions everybody's making. They were all.
We got a lot of time.
They were all qualified on what they did, and yet they were steroid guys.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of time between now and when the ballots officially go in, and then more time until they're officially announced a few weeks into January. I'm sure we'll be chewing on this ballot a lot more and all the reasons steroids are not for guys to vote or not vote for them. But if you stick with us, coming up next, free agent outfielder Tommy Pham. Joining us on the show is free agent outfielder Tommy Pham. He played in New York last year, so John and I got to see a lot of him. He was very good for the Mets. He was very good for the National League champion Arizona Diamondbacks. If I were going to put a point on it, Tommy, there were only 20 players in the whole sport who reached 16 homers and 22 steals last year. Would you like to know how many of them are free agents right now? He's on the show, the only one who reached both of those numbers. And it makes me wonder, because I know we talked about this in the postseason a little bit, Tommy, the idea of going into free agency. You had a very good year, and yet the suspicion is always a player like you has got to wait. You're going to get a one-year contract. That's not going to be for top money. Take us through being your tier free agent. What are you doing right now? Are you even hearing from teams, or do they have to get through other people before they get to you?
Well, free agency, you control your own free agency ultimately, based off your performance. If I put up a season like 17, 18, or 19, I'm easily a top dog regardless of my age, and that's what kind of still motivates me, to put up another great season just to shut up the naysayers, so to say. But to answer your question, there is a ton of interest already compared to last year, of course. Kind of how free agency works is, and I could give you, with me being in free agency 2 years in a row, in 2021, I probably had 10 to 12 teams call and talk over the course of the off season and lockout, that lockout off season. Then when we got unlocked out, I would say that off season, I probably got about 5 to 6 offers, somewhere around there. And a lot of the teams were trying to bank on me, having a rebound year. So it was a lot of teams like that necessarily you wouldn't say they were contenders. Then last year I only had 3 teams interested, and this year the interest is like 10 teams already. There's been about, my agency has talked to about 10 teams, no offers yet. And that's kind of how this game is played in free agency. You get about, and it's what it looks like this year, 10 to 12 teams interested. And based off my previous experience, I'll probably get about 5 or 6 offers out of those teams. The good news is so far this year, a lot of the teams are playoff teams. They're teams that we can expect to be contending, in September and October.
I'm not surprised there's a ton of interest. I mean, you had a great year. I mean, you were a key man for a World Series team. You batted third when I was there in the NLCS. Ultimately batted fifth a lot, but certainly understand the great interest in you. I wanted to ask you, when you were traded from the Mets to the Diamondbacks, what did you think? I know you're from Las Vegas, so it's somewhat close. You probably like that aspect of it, but nobody saw them as a World Series team. Did you see them as a World Series team ultimately, and how did the Diamondbacks do it?
I didn't see them as a World Series team when I got traded. When I spoke to Mike on the phone, once he traded for me, he said I was going to play every day, and he said he thinks his team could, open a lot of eyes and surprise some people. And I didn't see it. I didn't have his vision. But with the rough start we had once I was traded, towards the end of August, early September, we started putting together winning streaks, and I started to see things come together with the team. Our bullpen started to take shape, and we started to find ways to win games offensively. My mom ultimately she loved the trade because yes, it's closer to home. Um, I don't really care about the logistics of where I play. To you, from playing on the West, playing on the East, that really doesn't bother me anymore. I just more so care about playing on a contending team, and of course playing.
Tommy, they won 84 games. They got to the NLCS. You're a good observer of the game. Do you believe this is just the beginning for a team that has Corbin Carroll, Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen, that this is a team that is going to be a perennial? Or do you think there was some flukishness of you guys getting in this year and going as far as you went?
No, that team is a good team. With the expanded playoffs, I definitely see them as a team that's always going to contend with the core they have. They have 2 horses. Gallen and Kelly are studs. When you look at all the teams or most of the playoff teams, they have 2 legit arms, and you have a bullpen that has pretty much what I like to call 3 closers. You need 3 closers nowadays. The Phillies, it seems like they have like 5, but you need 3 guys to be high leverage guys, and Arizona has that. Paul, you have Kev, and you have Ryan. Ryan was a huge pickup for the team as well. I believe he was picked up off waivers, and I faced him all the time, and I know personally how nasty he is, especially against right-handed batters with that arm angle and his stuff. Then what you're also forgetting is Marte. You know, Marte is a baller. You know, he's a guy who potentially, you know, I think 30 home run guy. He hits the ball really hard. He can steal bases and he plays great defense. Then you have Seawalk. You know, one thing I was impressed with Walker. I didn't I didn't know how good of a defensive first baseman he is. He's man, he is elite defensively. And you know he a 30 home run guy, and I believe he stole 10 bags. So they have a very solid core, and up the middle defensively, they the D-backs might be one of the strongest defending teams in the game up the middle with I call him G baby, you know, Moreno, Gold Glover, um, Marte is a great defender. And then you know, shortstop they have Perdomo and Lawler coming up, and in center field you have uh, a Gold Glover to me and Thomas. You know, they're so strong defensively up the middle, and you know they have two horses. Really, all they really need is you know just filling out the rest of the roster with guys that are great fits in that clubhouse on that team. Um, they're going to have to be they're going to have to sign the right veterans. Um, you know, I one thing I noticed with when you have a young team like that, you want to bring in the right veterans.
You know, one thing that I heard from people in the Diamondbacks organization is that you were the right veteran for that clubhouse. What is it about you? We know that you're very candid and you'll tell it like it is. And you know, and I agree with you. By the way, Moreno is a future superstar, and as is Carroll. Obviously, they got some players there. What do you think you did for that team? Because I think they were very appreciative of what you added to that team, not only in the lineup but in the clubhouse.
Man, I care about the game. I care about the game. I still care about. I look at this game as not only the game itself, but also you know a business. You know, if I was running a business and you know I was hiring employees, I would want the employees that will go out and put their heart out for me. And you know, there might be times where it doesn't look like that for me, but I still care. I still care about winning. I care about getting better still. And you know, when you factor those two things in, it you'll know that with me, you're going to get someone that's going to prepare every day, that's still trying to get better every day, and that cares about winning every day. And when you apply that, you know, to a team, you know, it has more of effect on young guys, of course, versus you know veteran players. It's it's hard. It's hard for a young player in the game to see a guy like it in my in. I'm gonna give you an example. When I was called up with St. Louis, it was hard for me not to go every day and not prepare the right way. When I saw Yachty and Wainwright working hard every day, you know, I saw them in the video room, the weight room, the trainer's room, out on the field, and in the cages. And I was like, okay, this is what it takes to be great. This is what it takes to be a pro. This is what it takes to stay in the league. And that, you know, that always just stuck with me. You know, I was lucky to have two great examples.
You know, Tommy, we had Mark Canna on the show not long after you had major comments about questioning maybe the work ethic of some of the guys on the Mets. And to your work ethic, Mark Hanna actually said it was difficult. It's difficult to some degree for everyone else because he said he's not sure he's ever seen anyone work harder than you. So that almost everybody, by that definition, it would be hard to work as hard. You're on our show now. We obviously have a lot of people in the New York market. What were you talking about when you said those things about the Mets?
Yeah, it's a tough situation to talk about, because I'm tired of being in the headlines regarding
You're the only
what my
honest guy
comment
out
about
there.
them. I was pretty clear when I said it, and we could put it to an end here today. The thing I didn't like in New York as a player was in May we were consistently rolling out one group for batting practice, and I don't think you guys understand the importance of that, because if you recall, I wasn't playing every day, April and May. So batting practice is my time to shag in the outfield. That's the shagging fly balls in the outfield during batting practice is the closest thing I could get to game. And when you're not playing every day, you need that. That is a necessity so that you could stay sharp, okay? Because you're not getting game reps. And when you only have one group taking batting practice and you're a part of that one group, that means, let's say a group is 4 or 5 rounds of batting practice, So for half of that group, I had to go out and shag in the outfield. Then the other half, I would go in and hit for, because there's only one group, work on defense, the group, the 1 or 2 groups I'm not hitting. So it was a problem to me because I'm not playing every day. And it's also not something that's common, not in May. You might see one group roll out in September, but not in May. And it's a veteran team. Guys have done it for so long that a lot of guys just don't like batting practice. But as a teammate, I would want at least 2 groups of batting practice groups in May. And guys just prepare different. When you've been in the league so long, guys have different routines. Some guys like to only hit in the cage before a game. Some guys, from what I saw this year, only like to hit, right before the game to sharpen up their swing. Some guys like to do early work. Everyone's different. But I could tell you this, out of all the teams I played on, minus the Mets, we were rolling out more than one group in May. So that's the only problem I had, because like I said, I wasn't playing every day, and I had to stay sharp so that when my name was called to play, that I give the team the best chance to win. I'm not out there looking like I'm first day of spring training.
Just make sure I understand, and we don't have to belabor this forever, but with only one group, does that mean you didn't have the opportunity to take batting practice, or there weren't enough guys who volunteered?
No. So that was that. I'm sorry if I didn't explain it so that you understood. Let's say we do 5 rounds of batting practice. I would shag 2 of those 5 rounds. Then the last 3, I would come in and to hit batting practice. So I was getting batting practice because I had to shag, 2 of the 5 rounds. And it's just, when you're at the big league level, nothing is kind of forced on you. It's just all about how, you being a pro.
So Tommy, just because I think it will lead, I think you enjoyed playing for Buck Showalter in New York. I wonder if I could ask you about, because ultimately Buck wasn't kept here. So can I ask you what you thought of Buck? And also, should it be incumbent upon him veteran manager to say, hey, I need more than 4 or 5 guys taking batting practice for the reasons that you were speaking about, and be able to put his veteran foot down and do something about it.
Guys might be dealing with injuries, to where, it's more important to get treatment than to continue to, to do more practice. Availability is more important than being on the bench hurt. But Bucks, if Buck wants to manage, Buck should be managing in this game. He offers too much to the game as a manager to not be managing. Buck is one of the smartest baseball minds in the game. You could learn so much from him, just standing by him and the way he sees stuff. He'll call something out, then it happens, and you're just like, wow, he knows the game. Buck really knows the game. Buck has doctored this game. He deserves to be managing. He's a straight shooter. As a player, all you can ask for is your manager to be honest with you. That's all you can ask for. Because when I've seen other parts of the opposite part of that, and it's just terrible. The players you lose the respect of the player.
Getting back to your free agency, you started out with St. Louis, played there with several years, but you've been going, basically a team a year on average. Boston, you played with Tampa, you had Mets, Arizona. I'm sure I'm leaving many out. How is this life for you, number one? And number two, how are you doing now? I know when I was covering you in the NLCS, you had turf toe you were playing through. How are you now doing? And how's this been to go from, do you mind playing on a different team every year, or would you like to settle down somewhere?
Yeah, I didn't expect to get traded this year. So it was a little hard for me, when the last season I expected to get traded, but this year I didn't. So that was hard. Sometimes fans really just don't understand the business side of baseball. When you're signing 1-year deals, like me, and a lot of that is because of me, because of my me underperforming. When you're signing 1-year deals, the way this game works around the trade deadline, when you're on an expiring deal and there's teams that are trying to contend, your contract or you as a player looks a whole lot more appealing to the team that you're on. And when you're on a team that's losing, they rather get something for you than to keep you. That's just, business 101, basically. Do I like getting traded? Getting traded in the middle of the season is one of the toughest things in this game. It's not easy to just pack up your stuff and go to a new team. Especially, when I got traded to Arizona, I didn't really know anybody personally on the team other than Kyle Lewis. So, the human element side to that, where you got to learn your new teammates. You got to really figure out how to process certain guys. It's tough, to fix that, play better.
That's a Buck Showalterism, right? Is like you want to change it, win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just it's up to me to play better.
Tommy, you mentioned this during the postseason when we talked a little bit, and John kind of detailed it. You've been a free agent each of the last 2 seasons. You've been traded at the deadline each of the last 2 seasons. I think you've been traded 4 times in all, 3 times at the deadline. You've been with 7 teams. And I think just in frustration one day when we were chatting, you went, I've either got to get a no trade clause or an assignment clause, so that makes it a little tougher to get traded. So tell us, you're a free agent. What is the most important thing? You're in your mid-30s now. You've been in a lot of places. You clearly care about winning. What's most important to Tommy Pham right now?
I don't view myself as a platoon player. So I I'm not comfortable going into a situation where they're saying, "Hey, you're only going to play against lefties." I still want to play every day. That's most important to me than winning. Than winning, of course, I want to play on a team that, of course, I feel like they aspire to be in the postseason.
And from what you've heard so far, that's good. You believe that's going to happen from the early feelers. We're only a couple of weeks into free agency. You believe you're going to be able to get the two things you're looking for, which is playing time and the ability to do it with what you think is a high level team. Because again, last year you thought the Mets were going to be a high level team, but a team you believe you'll play a lot and will be playing important games in September and maybe October.
Absolutely.
I had one more question for you. You were 4 for 4 in a World Series game. I think you've had 3 4-hit games in the postseason, same as Pujols, right? I think you have the record. You had a shot to be at 5 hits, and you told Torey Lovullo, go ahead and put Jace Peterson in the game for me the 5th time. Why? That was very nice, I think. Why did you do that? You could have been a 5-hit World Series player.
Yeah, both. That would have been cool, but I think looking back at it now, that was an easy decision, and it was the right decision because one, Jace is a stand-up guy. Everybody would do it for him, and two, looking back at it now, I believe that was his only at bat in the World Series. So I would happily drop that 5 for 5 to get him his at bat in the World Series. That's a no-brainer.
Well, you used a term, Tommy, that I'm pretty confident I don't like to speak for John, but I'm going to hear. You're a stand-up guy. We appreciated that. We appreciate it wherever you're playing. We certainly appreciated it in the Met clubhouse. So best of luck to you in your free agency and wherever you end up. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. And thanks for joining us on the show, Tommy.
Happy Thanksgiving to you guys. Appreciate it.
We, of course, thank Tommy Pham for joining the show. John, hit or error?
I'm going to say the Phillies for bringing Aaron Nola back. I'm going to take the easy route here. He's obviously been a very dependable pitcher for them. Why take a chance on somebody else? He loved it there. They got him for probably a little bit less than somebody else was willing to offer. They got it done. That's the way Dave Dombrowski operates. I think the Phillies, they're all kind of friends of the show, right? We've had on Sam Fuld and Rob Thompson a couple times and Dave Dombrowski, but not the reason I'm picking them. They got their man and they're still working. I mean, I think they're hoping for Yamamoto. I don't know what their chances are. Just about everybody wants Yamamoto, but I'll give a gold star to the Phillies this week for locking up Aaron Nola quickly.
John, maybe we need to start consulting about this beforehand because I was going to do this. So why don't I reconfigure a little? I'll touch on a bit of yours. For my hit, I'll do Alex Anthopoulos and Dave Dombrowski. I like executives who kind of know what they like and like what they want and go and do things instead of playing the long game over the offseason. I think they're both literalists. We deal in era now with a lot of executives who are like, hey, the way to improve is you could score more or give up less. And they need a third baseman. And then I don't like the prices on the third baseman. They get a starting pitcher and you still need the third baseman. When Dave Dombrowski needs something, he goes and gets it. When Alex Anthopoulos needs something, he's aggressive. And I think that they merged here because I think the Braves were one of the more aggressive teams. They cleared out some payroll. They cleared out roster spots. They have been beaten in both of Nola's starts the last 2 postseasons when Atlanta was eliminated by Philadelphia. This was a player they wanted. And I think the Phillies acted boldly. They probably didn't intend to go to 7 years, but to keep an historic player, which is another thing I like. It looks like a player who will play his whole career there. I kind of like that. That's my we're kind of a joint hit here.
Yeah, I mean, one thing the Phillies did do is they did come up quite a bit, and I've seen different numbers thrown around, but I've been told, and I think it's on good authority, that the Phillies were around $100 million in spring training, and Nola's side was around $200 million. And he pitched one more year, and he had a 4-something ERA. Now, he was very good in the postseason. I was there for the NLCS. 3 out of his 4 games were excellent. So overall, he's gotten through the year. He's again been dependable. He hasn't gotten hurt. And he had a very good postseason, but not a great regular season, 4.5 ERA. And he went up from 100 million or thereabouts to 172 million, still less than at least one other team was willing to offer. Might have been Atlanta. I know St. Louis was in there as well. But you know what? The Phillies do what it takes. They've been great in free agency, particularly other teams' free agency. Schwarber's been great. Castellanos has been very good. Harper's obviously been amazing. Wheeler's been amazing. So they know what they're doing in free agency. They know the value of things, and I think Aaron Nola is worth it.
Yeah, I think it's their seventh player who will make over $20 million a year next year. We wouldn't be surprised if they extended Zach Wheeler and got Yamamoto or someone else before the end. All subjects we'll keep talking about if you keep listening to the show, a podcast from the New York Post. As always, we thank our producers, Andrew Hartz and Jake Brown. Don't forget, this podcast drops on the Yes app. We'll do so about Wednesday at noon. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to the podcast. And the hot stove is burning. John, I'm going to do it for both of us. Everybody who's a listener, have a happy, healthy Thanksgiving, and we'll be back again next week with the show.